I saw a video of them taking over Grand Central Station with advanced men to secure the doors and then paralyze all the holiday travel. We see them in harassment swarms around individuals, such as that innocent Jewish student at Harvard.
And now, The Edwin Black Show. Sponsored by the books of Edwin Black, available on Amazon and at booksellers worldwide. And now, here's Edwin.
Welcome to the Edwin Black Show. I'm Edwin Black, investigative journalist, historian, and author of 200 editions in 40 languages in 190 countries worldwide, including IBM and the Holocaust, and the Farhud, Roots of the Arab Nazi Alliance in the Holocaust, which described a bloody and animalistic massacre in Hebron in 1929, and then again in Baghdad in 1941, both eerily similar to the ones we saw unfold in Israel October 7th, some 2 months ago. If you like our show's content, spread the word. You can subscribe for alerts at theedwinblackshow.com. And if you want to support our work, go to theedwinblackshow.com/support. Your help, big or small, assures our complete and utter intellectual and uncensored journalistic independence. Please know that this show is completely supported by a worldwide volunteer effort, and it's totally unmonetized. As it is the end of the year and the giving season, take a minute. Help us maintain our extremely high level of excellence and documentation. Our world is specifically threatened by ignorance and misinformation, and we are at the tip of the spear of facts in context. Go to theedwinblackshow.com/support, and thank you. We have solidarity today from many national organizations, such as the Emerson Family Foundation, the Fuel Freedom Foundation, the Israel on Campus Coalition, as well as Stand With Us, JNS, the Israeli-American Council, EMET, American Association of Jewish Lawyers and Jurists, Scholars for Peace in the Middle East, ZOA Michigan, the Gross Family Center, Americans for Peace and Tolerance, the Southwest Jewish Congress, and plenty more. Thank you, everyone. That said, remember, I only speak for myself and for history. Today's episode is sponsored without any preconditions, requests, or stipulations by the just released third edition of Ken Abramowitz's best-selling and painfully predictive book, The Multi-Front War, third edition, and co-sponsored by Caring Physicians in Maryland. Today, we welcome guests from across America, including our 4 watch parties in the Villages, Newton, Mass., Chicago, and Tampa Bay. Hi, Harvey. I'll see you soon. Overseas, I see viewers logged on from Australia and New Zealand, as always. We have Holland, Sweden. I see France, Italy, Spain, Germany, Great Britain, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, India, and Israel, of course, plus other countries. If you have a question, place one short sentence in Zoom's QA feature. The Edwin Black Show, along with our YouTube site, is global and fast-growing, enjoying many tens of thousands of views. We speak frankly and without tremor to a fragmented world seeking better understanding of our tormented past, our present, very, very tense, and a future still uncertain. And remember, we will not be censored. By the way, stay tuned for my special word of wisdom. You'll enjoy it at the very end of the show, just before I sign off. We'll get to our always fiery episode, Unanswered Questions, this time number 14, in a few minutes after some brief announcements and then items from the week. At the Edwin Black Show and our companion YouTube site, we have just released more compelling and gut-wrenching episodes. The key episode at this moment is Kristallnacht 2.0, Part 3, one of the most important and gut-wrenching episodes we have ever produced, and I urge you to watch it in its entirety and share its content. And we are just releasing now with full illustration our most recent unanswered questions, number 13, from a few months ago. My tour continues. Earlier this month, I hosted an important congressional event with author Ken Abramowitz, launching the third edition of his prescient book, The Multi-Front War. The event featured appearances by UAE Rabbi Abadi, Sarah Stern, the president of Emet, JNS Jerusalem Bureau Chief, Alex Trayman, former Representative Trent Franks from Arizona, and Canadian privacy guru Sharon Polsky. Next month, January 24, I deliver a 4-event series in Florida with the Gross Family Center for the Study of Antisemitism and the Holocaust. First at Florida Atlantic University, then Boca Raton Synagogue, where I expect some 800 to attend, and then Palm Beach Gardens Chabad, plus a bonus in Tampa, where I return to the University of South Florida, Hillel. Very important there. Internationally in February, it's a return to Mexico City for a powerful community-wide 4-event series sponsored by Yad Vashem. In March of next year, I deliver a presentation on AI and anti-Semitism at the Holocaust Center of Ramapo in New Jersey. And then in April, the Canadian Privacy Conference in Montreal. And then much, much more from the Hillcrest Jewish Center in Queens, New York, to an exciting return in May to Australia. Get details of all my appearances from edwinblack.com/events, and let us meet up in your city. Stand tall. I'm coming your way. Again, I remind my viewers of a terrible website you must know about, publishing the war crimes documentation videos. It is Hamas-massacre.net. That is Hamas-massacre.net. This is the documentation we must confront, just as we did after the Holocaust, but this is a magnitude worse. These atrocities were not committed decades ago, but just months ago. Not hidden as they were in Germany and Europe, but gleefully broadcast to a cheering Palestinian world. When Israel has finished Hamas, there will be war crime trials in Jerusalem. This documentation on this website will be vital. So we are now in the midst of World War J, the global war against the Jews in the Middle East and here at home in America, and roiling through the nations of the world. Let us start with Swords of Iron, Israel's war to destroy Hamas. Yes, Israel is collapsing Hamas, almost done mopping up the last remnants of the terrorist infrastructure in the north. We now see mass surrenders. At the same time, we must recall the torment and tragedy of the IDF killing 3 hostages, waving white flags. Know this, if Israel wanted to destroy the people of Gaza, it would flatten the strip in hours with carpet bombing, the way we did in Dresden and more recently in Mosul when we destroyed ISIS. Israeli soldiers must go house to house, doorway to doorway, from careful to careful. Hamas waves white flags and calls out in Hebrew for rescue, and then ambushes our boys. Just a few days ago, a Hamas killer waved the white flag of surrender and then opened fire, wounding several soldiers before being neutralized. These people are the effluent of hell's outfall. The fog and fire of war some days ago led to 3 hostage deaths by the IDF. I was moved by the mother of one hostage, the hostage Yotam Chaim, who sent a message of forgiveness and love to the soldiers who accidentally shot her boy. She blamed not the IDF, but Hamas. Now that is character. Next, the Biden administration, which is riddled top to bottom with Jew hatred and Israel hatred, and which even saw, get this, dozens of White House staffers without permission and improperly assemble in an illegal demonstration in front of the White House demanding a ceasefire. openly condemning the Biden policy of support for Israel. A ceasefire means Hamas regroups and prepares to execute another massacre as it has openly promised. It's a win for Hamas and the promise of another mass murder. The Hamas-loving progressives and liberals never call for the hostages to be released. Instead, they tear down hostage flyers as an expression of their Jew hatred. Remember, Biden personally supports Israel's right to self-defense, but his administration and a growing and indispensable fraction of the Democratic Party base hates Jews and hates Israel. The party must bow to these extremists, and so we see all these senseless calls for a two-state solution. That will never happen in our lifetime, and incessant calls to go slow and careful to spare innocent civilian lives, and at the same time speed things up to avoid the 2024 election dynamics. Israel cannot win this war alone. It needs constant resupply of 122 millimeter shells, 150 millimeter shells for its tanks and artillery, and Tamir interceptor rockets for the Iron Dome. They're only made in America. Hamas continues to rocket Tel Aviv almost daily. So while Israeli warplanes and artillery forces are operating simultaneously over Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and soon, I promise, you'll see them in Yemen, it needs constant American resupply. Plus, the Jewish state is awaiting the 5 strategic items it needs to finish the job in Iran. Those 5 things are in the pipeline, but they're not yet delivered. Next item, future massacres. All right, Steve, write this down. Could an October 7 massacre be repeated on the West Bank, launched by the forces of the Palestinian Authority? I hope not. But remember, the Palestinian security forces number 30 to 40,000, perhaps 50,000 members, organized into more than just a street police force or security service. The PASF has a navy which has worked closely with the Gaza forces along the Gaza coast. It retains remnants of Force 17 terrorist commando units. I have reviewed videos of PA brigades just recently practicing a takeover of Israeli kibbutzim in Judea and Samaria, including hostage taking, forward deployment, advancing under military fire, soldier evacuation, and full attack scenarios and firefights at the hilltops overlooking Israeli villages. The men in these videos are not policemen in uniforms. They are in full soldier battle dress with military helmets, weapons, tents, and they are all about professional tactics. They were, in fact, initially trained by U.S. General Keith Dayton as part of the Oslo Accords, but recently received additional training from Italian security forces. Make no mistake, they do not report to kleptocratic Mahmoud Abbas, but to Al-Fatah, the fighting force of the PLO. And remember that convicted terrorists, killers, receive positions and payments in the security forces while in Israeli prisons, and then upon any release are immediately inducted into active units. Fatah and the Palestinian Authority have repeatedly praised the Hamas attack. What is the Palestinian army training for in military outfits? They are doing so right under our noses. Pay attention. I don't like predicting reality. Recently, the director of Kamal Adwan Hospital in Jabalia in Gaza was captured and gave a full video confession that anyone could see on YouTube, admitting that his hospital served as a Hamas control center, as does his ambulance fleet, and he himself is a Hamas officer known under the moniker Abu Hassan. Did ABC News cover it? No. Did NBC News cover it? No. None of the mainstream media did cover it. That does not suit their narrative. The fake reports of an Israeli bombing of a hospital did. So they all went with that in spades, even though they had to quietly retract their reports in the 1 to 2 days to follow. The World War J continues. The pro-Hamas Nazis are rising within the Democratic Party using Nazi-style tactics. Remember, folks, the global Arab community, under the International Arab Hired Committee, formed a robust military alliance with the Nazis during the Third Reich, and they fought shoulder to shoulder with them in 3 Waffen-SS divisions across Europe, from Prague to Paris. They worked hard to have European countries send Jews directly to death camps in Poland, and they adopted Nazism as a modern identity. In Syria, the Syrian Socialist Party flag today, now, is still a swastika in motion. At the top of this alliance was an Arab hero, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj Amin al-Husseini. After the Berlin fell in 1945, Hitler's war against the Jews was exported to the Middle East as the Arab nations hosted some 2,000 Gestapo and SS officers with new identities and installed them in military and security positions. You can read the specifics in my book, The Farhud, Roots of the Arab Nazi Alliance in the Holocaust. We are seeing Palestinian Nazi brown shirt tactics transplant into America. They have learned, and they have waited, and they have waited and waited further, and now, bang, they're everywhere. What we see unfolding before us is not freedom of speech or expression in the public square as our founding fathers intended, but criminal harassment. Palestinian agitators, they have our addresses. They have everyone's addresses, and they have battle plans. I saw a video of them taking over Grand Central Station with advance men to secure the doors and then paralyze all the holiday travel. We see them in harassment swarms around individuals, such as that innocent Jewish student at Harvard. It could be Alec Baldwin walking in Manhattan a few days ago. It could be Elie Wiesel's son earlier this week at a train station. It could be political leaders walking to and from their cars, as we have seen in our nation's capital. It could be Democratic leaders such as Michigan United States Representatives Debbie Dingell and Hillary Scholten, who were briefly trapped with other lawmakers inside a Democratic National Committee building on Capitol Hill and had to be rescued by police. It could be outside any legislator's home at 3 a.m. to wake up the household, such as Democratic Representative Shri Thanadar when they were screaming, "We will not let you sleep." It's not just Jewish students in Cooper Union trapped in the building. It's all of us. These rampaging Palestinian brown shirts have our street addresses. They have long lists from the Boston Mapping Project, which co-located every Jewish individual and business in Boston, Massachusetts, and a dozen more created from the internet and maybe the stolen Ashkenazi Jewish database of 23andMe. There are many people under surveillance watching their comings and goings so they can select the time of assault and then suddenly appear. It's always in a group with cameras whirring and their hateful looks stirring with no amount of fact or reason to cause demurring. Remember what I was told in Dallas. Facts will not be useful at this time. The reports are coming in every few seconds from across North America, and they have weaponized the witless, whose lack of knowledge is limitless. Palestinian organizers openly bragged that they look for people with low information or no information to spew and sow and then reap fake accusations of occupation, morality, shaking calls for intifada and genocide, and even the president of Harvard can't decide whether to issue a chide or let it slide. And they have further weaponized the insane, disturbed, and deinstitutionalized individuals of our urban wilderness. So crazed and obsessive individuals, hypnotized by random exhortations to kill the Jews and expel the Jews, now show up at Jewish schools and synagogues, threaten to slit babies' throats, rape Jewish women, and because their urban pavement insanity has been successfully captured and released on the Jewish community by these Palestinian Nazis, they consider it more than a tactic. They consider it a triumph. This is the culture of Hebron in 1929, the Farhud of 1941, and Dagestan of just a few weeks ago. The coming rampage in America is penned up, being restrained by just thin ribbons. What you are seeing on bridges, shopping centers, train stations, and college campuses is just a warm-up for what they have planned for Chicago in August 2024, when the Democratic Convention will be held hostage and perhaps see a rampage, not unlike the Democratic Convention in 1968 that I covered, when the so-called weathermen ran wild in the street, destroying property, attacking people, and physically crippling at least one politician who opposed them. My friends in the Democratic Party, they are scared to their core that I may be right. We have seen the old line Democratic Party hijacked by socialists, communists, and anarchists. Bernie Sanders and AOC and her squadron are socialists who just squatted in the Democratic Party and now are taking control of the entire property. The next hideous infusion will be Palestinian Nazis. They are organized. They have TikTokable slogans. They are communications savvy. They already admit they stage highway shutdowns not to prove a point, but to gather Google metrics. Be bothered by this. The respected Harvard-Harris poll of 18 to 24-year-olds, hip and hopelessly confused, flooded with information half true and totally false, and bereft of genuine knowledge and wisdom. Those 18 to 24-year-olds polled in the Harvard-Harris poll, they stated this: 60% of them, the October 7th massacre can be justified by Palestinian grievances. 79% support the ideology of a white people as oppressors, and 67% support the ideology that Jews are oppressors. I have two more polls that say the identical thing. 18 to 24 is the hottest of the coveted demographic groups, and the new emerging base of the Democratic Party, who will be registered, mobilized, stylized, vote as a bloc, and become a force to be reckoned with for mass persecution in the next election. The Democrats will not turn their back on the hot new demographic 18 to 24. They will inhale them, but it is the party's residual decency and old-time devotion to Jewish rights that will be exhaled. Blue will be the new brown. I do not wish to be validated and vindicated in this. I want to be all wrong, and now is your chance to make my insights irrelevant. Purge the dangerous. Do not merge with the dangerous Democratic Party. So I'm done with my rooftop, and now I climb down to answer your many, many questions. Here's a note from Harvey saying, don't forget the tragic massacre at XIV during the War of Independence. There is a modest display and reenactment on that site. Let me tell you something. It would take me a long, long time to recite all the tragedies and massacres that have been inflicted upon the Jews around the world and in Israel by their Arab and Jew-hating enemies. Thank you, Harvey. So, from the Watch Party in the Villages, I agree with your assessment of the Democratic Party, and I've been part of the political machine here for many years. That's the daily machine, or what's left of it. What is the chance that your predictions about 2024 will come true? What's the chance that my predictions about the Democratic Party will come true? 75%. That's too high. 75%. Write that down, Eve. Thank you, Villages. Watch Party, Newton, Mass. Talk to us about Claudine Gay, president of Harvard. She's just down the street. She seems to be completely unqualified and a serial plagiarist. The allegations of plagiarism against Miss Gay are continuing to expand. They've been under investigation, and she is now issuing revisions to her doctoral thesis and to articles in which wholesale blocks of information were lifted and deposited without attribution. So, as a man who has written 1,000,000 words and who specializes at looking at other people's work, because every scholar must familiarize themselves and have mastery over the secondary literature, it's your responsibility when you see a paragraph, one that you like, if you want to move it into your own work, you have to put quotations around it and give it attribution. So you need to say, as Joe Jones said in his 1970 book, or in his book titled such and such, and then you quote it. We do that all the time. Journalism lives on that. If you don't want to quote it exactly, but you want to paraphrase it, you take out the quotes and you still give it attribution. There are times when you could say, as a great Frenchman once said, list the stuff. You have a footnote. At the bottom of the footnote, it gives the exact citation. I have an entire team of people who specialize in footnotes. If you look at my books, such as War Against the Weak or IBM and the Holocaust, you'll see literally thousands of footnotes with great specificity. So that's called attribution. But you cannot lift a full paragraph out of someone else's work and throw it in and make it look like it's yours. That is called plagiarism. That is what she did. That is what she's having a hard time denying. And that's why Harvard has created this two-tier system of plagiarism for me and thee, if we should cross that line, but not plagiarism for her. She's a very weak candidate to be president of Harvard. She should have been removed long ago. She should have resigned long ago. She's never published a book. Her published works are very, very skinny. There's not many of them at all. And I hope that answers your question. I hope she is, in fact, removed one way or the other. By the way, the information I just gave you is parsed from the Harvard Crimson, which is the university newspaper, which just published an analysis earlier today. Now, from our watch party in Chicago, why is Texas flying immigrants into Chicago instead of busing them? That's because the socialist mayor of Chicago, I thought I'd never see it. The socialist mayor has created a city ordinance. The city does not have laws, it has ordinances that says that all bus companies have to be registered if they operate within the city limits, and they're not, and if they're coming from out of state, they dropping people, they need to only make 2 deliveries a day, come within certain hours. Now they've put other onerous conditions on them, like we want to manifest, and they're just weaponizing the law against these bus companies. They've already seized, impounded, I believe, 2 buses, and they've issued about 43 lawsuits against buses and drivers. So instead of that, Governor Abbott is flying them in to Chicago, which is under federal law and which is outside the jurisdiction of the mayor. That's why he's doing it. And as people may have seen today, we have a 5-digit number of illegals every day at the border, in excess of 10,000. We've got people who are going through 5 to 10 other countries to get to our country with a confirmed destination. Chicago, New York, Philadelphia. They're coming from India. They're coming from Mali. They're coming from Guinea. They're coming from Afghanistan. You don't see this anywhere but Fox News, and because they have drones capturing all of the action. Thank you, Watch Party in Chicago. I hope to get back there soon. Marlene from Grand Rapids. Okay, this is an interesting question, and I will take this last. Marlene, hang on, all right? Morrison Herzliya, how is it that after 2 months of nonstop warfare in Gaza, Hamas can still launch rockets every day against Tel Aviv? More than 12,000 in total. We just had a heavy barrage. It's something that most people don't know is that Hamas has these rockets on timers. So basically, the rocket men don't actually have to be at the launch site. They can set those to go off in a day, in an hour, in 2 days, in 2 hours. When they leave the launch site, they spray out an effluent that basically burns and destroys the site. So the evidence is not really visible. In addition, there were drone launching pads from almost all the tall buildings in Gaza. This is in the innocent civilian department, and they can launch those on timers. And that's why, even though we've devastated Hamas and we're only about halfway through the job, every day we see scores and scores of missiles going directly at innocent civilians in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and even the Galilee. Thank you very much. Melanie in Jacksonville, can we believe the Hamas Ministry of Health with its claim of 20,000 deaths? No, the answer is no. First of all, these people lie for a living. You can remember when the Baptist hospital was inadvertently, the parking lot was set aflame by an errant Islamic Jihad missile when the propellant spread all over those cars. Immediately, they said 500 dead, 500 casualty. So it's a fake. Here's another way you know it's fake. They said 20,000 dead. How many of those are Hamas fighters? Never stated. Never asked, never stated. It is estimated that about 7,000 of the 20 to 30,000 Hamas fighters have been killed. And I will say that Israel will continue its crusade to eliminate Hamas, including every commander, every fighter, every paper shuffler, every pizza delivery boy, and every falafel stand vendor in the Hamas sphere. So I would not believe it. That does not mean that lots of people have not been killed. In fact, the IDF itself stated that for every Hamas terrorist they are killing, they estimate that there have been 2 inadvertent civilian deaths. But there has been no fighting force in the history of civilization which has fought in this way, with the technology, the sighting, the advanced notification, the door knocks, the leaflets, the humanitarian corridors. Israel does not want to kill civilians. That said, we're finding fewer and fewer civilians to be counted as innocent. We are now told by NBC that this gal who was at the music festival and who was said, "Don't kill me," was taken away on a motorcycle, that many of these people were raped and killed by men and boys in civilian attire. They were not part of the actual Hamas fighter brigades. And we know that according to recent polls by the Arab world's best polling sources, that some 75% of the Palestinians, both in Gaza and the West Bank, absolutely approve of the October 7th tragedy. Hell, they approve in Columbia University and Harvard. So why wouldn't they approve in Gaza? Thank you very much. Peter in Marcia in Los Angeles. You always ask a good question. Thank you, guys. Why has John Fetterman been attacked by fellow Democrats? Well, I was very critical of John Fetterman during his election race because he couldn't express himself. It seemed like he was paralyzed and he couldn't do the job. But I have to admit, John Fetterman has really grown a humongous brain and has become, in my opinion, one of the savviest of senators in Washington, D.C., and one of the most expressive. John Fetterman, who doesn't give a rat's tuchus about what anybody says, has openly condemned Hamas, openly rejected the Palestinian Nazi protesters, and he also opposes the masses of illegal immigration at the border, and now grants interviews in which he says that the progressives want him to catch some kind of a disease and die off anyway. There was just some of that coming out now. And I think that Fetterman is one of the good thinkers of the Democratic Party, and I urge him, and I think it might occur, he might pick himself up and leave the Democratic Party and switch over to the Republicans. I might like to see that. All right, let's get with some questions here that are submitted. Wes, I'm not going to read your first question. There's too many sentences, only one sentence in a question, but I'll summarize it. You're clearly concerned about the forces of communism, socialism, and anti-Semitism taking power over the Democratic Party, but you say very little about the present state of the Republican Party. Are you concerned about well-organized extremist elements on the right seizing further control of the GOP? The answer, Wes, do you have a piece of paper? No, I'm not. And most of the people I know who follow this are not. We judge the actions of the Republicans. We judge the actions of the Democrats. And those actions are seen every hour of every day. So write it down, not, N-O-T. Here's another question. What sources do you believe with respect to the number of Palestinian civilians killed in this war, and what is that number? We don't know that number. There are many people buried under the rubble, but I do believe the IDF, when it says inadvertently killed 2 civilians for every terrorist that it has killed. That's an amazing declaration by a military force, and it shows the level of decency and honesty of the IDF. It would stand to reason under those conditions there might almost be a 5-figure number, but I don't know, and we're not going to know until the end of this war. It took weeks to find out how many people were murdered by Hamas in just this little strip of those Gaza border villages. They couldn't find the bodies. They didn't know who was dead or alive. And we have a note from Jerusalem at this point, and I won't repeat it. Let's go to the next question. Hey, Wes, ask me another, but keep it to one sentence. Jeanette in Dallas, did Hamas gas Jews on the Israeli border of October 7th? Yes, Hamas used poison gas. The way they did it was when Jews were holed up in their safe rooms, they went to the intake valves and to the air vents. They ignited certain toxic substances which are known for giving off quickly killing toxic gases. And many Jews died of asphyxiation and poison gas. Very few people know that, Jeanette, but that's a great question. And I hope to see you in Dallas in the spring. Denise in Los Angeles, how could the climate movement turn against Israel, which has more than 300 startups to repair our ecosystem and thwart climate change? Well, what did it for me with the climate crazies is Greta Thunberg, thousands of people who agree with Greta Thunberg, and the fact that even just a couple of days ago in Berkeley, California, a Jewish climate scientist was disinvited from a major climate conference because this individual was Jewish and supported Israel. Right now, if the climate crazies are led by Greta Thunberg and people who agree with Greta Thunberg, I don't want to hear from them. You can't expect me to listen to people who agree with the killers. There's no two sides. It's not the Palestinian side and the Israel side. There's only the bad guys and the good guys. And that was ensured by the horrible rape, massacre, and dismemberment of all these Jewish people, which you could see, unfortunately, at Hamas-massacre.net. So right now, although I've been committed to the climate crisis for many years, all I care about is adjusting and adapting. What do we need to do to adapt to the irredeemable fact, the unstoppable fact that we are facing climate change? We're facing warmer climates, colder climates, we're changing rising sea levels, all types of things, disasters, once in a century hurricanes that we might see once a year. We need to adapt, and we will adapt by paying attention to reality and not listening to those who side with Palestinian Nazis. That's how it is. And if you're looking for good PR, you just lost it when you put your keffiyeh on and said from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Okay. I guess you don't mind if the sea rises from all these people being thrown into the water. Okay, here we go. Oh, and by the way, the reason that COP perhaps was so unsuccessful, the big climate conference in the Middle East, Israel normally sends thousands of people to that event. Due to the war, they could only spend a few. Here's another question. Do you believe that humans burning fossil fuels is the primary cause for global warming? And if not, what is? No, I don't believe that at all. I believe that civilization, all of civilization, which has replaced greenlands with pavement and asphalt, which has burned trees, and which has burned trees for many, many centuries before petroleum came into the human lexicon, about not quite 200 years ago. I believe that deforestation, I believe that the denuding of the forests on Cyprus, which was done by the Romans. Remember, the word Cyprus means copper, and they needed wood to make metal. There was no making metal without wood. Virtually in the 1600s, there was a timber shortage. Well, when you kill that many trees to build boats and homes and bake bread, you are causing a climate change. There have been many climate changes, and I don't believe it's just fossil fuels. I believe it's war. And believe me, World War I was not mainly fought with fossil fuels, but 100,000 artillery shells a day, year in, year out, that's going to make some climate change. In Chicago, we reversed the river. We reversed the Chicago River so that we could get out to Lake Michigan. Man has been a poor steward of this lovely planet, and all of it's got together make a change. Edwin, you're rejecting present-day scientific explanation based upon countless measurements of atmospheric carbon. Yes, I am. And I remind you that climate scientists in the 1940s served the Nazis. Remember, it was the meteorologists and climate scientists who worked for the Nazis to predict the weather when they feared for 2 years that there might be an Allied invasion. It was scientific engineers who built the Autobahn and who built these giant structures for the Nazis. It was the medical men, the men in white coats, who had a scientific consensus that people from Africa were talking baboons and needed to be put in cages, that Jews had to be destroyed. They called it eugenics. It was practiced at Harvard long before, many generations before the current administration was there. Never believe scientific consensus. Listen to the scientific consensus and then form a decision. Remember, I follow physics, astrophysics, every day, every hour. I'm fascinated by it. And every hour, there's a new theory about our universe, about the strength of our universe, the speed of our universe, the direction of our universe, the creation of our universe. And it's our duty to observe the scientific method, which means challenge the conclusion. When you challenge a conclusion, then you have the scientific method of replicability. Can you prove your point? Even Einstein only called his relativity principles a theory, the theory of relativity. Thank you very, very much. Please don't test my patience by asking me about scientific consensus when they're siding with the Nazis, when they're siding with the Palestinians, when they're refusing to recognize the damage done to Israel. If the climatologists of the world wanted to convince me, they've lost that opportunity. I don't want to talk to them. I want to fix the problem. I do want to fix the problem. Next, Murray in Pittsburgh. How is it that the trans and LGBT movement is siding with the Palestinians? This is crazy. I recently saw an argument on the street. I have a video of this, of a trans guy with his rainbow schmata telling the Palestinians, we want to join you. And she's screaming at the guy saying, get away from me. If there's a trans guy who sets foot into Gaza, he's going to take the express elevator to the rooftop and they're going to shoot him in the knee and they're going to throw him off the roof, okay? Or they're going to hang him by the nearest crane. This is absolutely stupid. And so the liberal world has left the Jews. The Jews were with the liberal world. Every synagogue, every congregation has a committee for Tukan Olam, and that means repair the world. They have a do-gooders committee in every synagogue, and they're always trying to help the poor, advance the underdog, come to the rescue of people whose rights are not being observed. And all these people have abandoned the Jews. The Red Cross has abandoned the Jews. The United Nations has abandoned the Jews. A lot of these Hollywood figures have abandoned the Jews. Thelma and Louise, the next generation, I'm not going to see it because of Susan Sarandon. Many people have supported the Jews. And we're now seeing the dichotomy of our age. You're either with the forces of death, destruction, and darkness, or you are with the forces fighting to destroy evil. Now, I admit the Jews were late to the fight. The Jews tried everything they could to avoid the fight. They tried bribery. They tried nice stuff. They tried job permits. They tried everything they could. But at the end of the day, it was discovered that the old proverb, all comes to those who are patient, was the order of the day. And they proved what they could do. Raymond in Miami. How do we protect our society against the rise of anti-Semitism? Well, it's not just plain old anti-Semitism like when I was growing up with the movie The Gentleman's Agreement, where attorneys like Alan Dershowitz and Nat Lewin couldn't get a job as lawyers, that they had to work for the Department of Justice. It's not like that. This is active Jew hatred that wants to destroy the Jews. There are now people who find it easy and comfortable to repeat terrible things about Jews, like they want to kill them. You look at an institution of lower learning like Harvard, where they were so worried about microaggressions. God forbid we should misgender a guy, that there's a guy with a beard and he's slapped some lipstick on and he's trying to squeeze his big fat feet into high heels, and now he wants to be called a woman. Misgendering is even considered a crime in certain jurisdictions, an actual punishable crime. But here they can't figure out if calling for the genocide of Jews is some kind of little microaggression, if maybe this is okay. So we've got to start over again. We must start with a brand new generation. We need to rebuild goodness, and it's going to have to start with parents and grandparents raising their kids properly, training them properly in the school, and rebuilding our society. It's too late to tell some ignoramus on TikTok to change his views. His mind is not geared to that. We need to take responsibility for our families, for our children, for our grandchildren, for our society. It's going to take a lot. I can't solve it all now. In addition, what we need to do right this minute was we need to continue the lawsuits. That's all we have left. The number one groups would be the Stand With Us, Sadoff Legal Center. They're filing suits. The Lawfare Project, which just today issued another lawsuit against a Jewish boy where they carved a swastika on his back. Naturally, the number one group, the Brandeis Center, and even the ADL and Hillel Foundation are now joining the movement to issue lawsuits. Lawsuits, 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 okay? We need to educate, cooperate, coordinate, litigate, and then litigate some more. That's what we need to do. Martin in Los Angeles. Is UNICEF anti-Semitic? Yes. UNICEF anti-Semitic. I have a tape of a number of calls made in the United States and made in Australia, I believe Canada and New Zealand. They're all to UNICEF. And they say, hello, I'd like to give money to children in the Middle East who have been displaced from their homes. And they say, well, we're only accepting money for Gaza. We have money for the children of Syria, of Lebanon, of Afghanistan, of Gaza. We have for the children of Iraq, but none for Jewish children, none for Israeli children. And there are hundreds of thousands of Jews who are out of their homes in the north of Israel. They've been evacuated. They're refugees in their own country. From the south of Israel, they've been displaced. Their kids are away from their medical treatments, away from their schools. They need help also. Steve from Pennsylvania, I'll answer you shortly. So UNICEF is another UN enemy of the Jewish people. Don't give them a nickel. Thank you for that question. Roger L. in Boston. CNN has said, okay, apparently this guy has a picture, I've seen this picture, of CNN of a guy, an Israeli soldier, a couple of them, at this giant tunnel, the biggest tunnel in all of Gaza that they found, and it was right near the chief of Hamas's home. And the CNN caption said, Israel claims to have found a huge alleged Hamas tunnel. And the words claimed and alleged are there. Now, why would CNN, which is scraping the bottom of the barrel for readership and viewership, why would CNN say that Israel claims to have found a tunnel when there's a picture and video of a giant tunnel there, and there's all sorts of reporters running around that tunnel? Why would it say it's an alleged Hamas tunnel? Who else could it be? Could it be the Baptist choir built a tunnel? The Baptist choir of Texas built a tunnel? The media that the Jewish people have worked so hard to cultivate, to believe in, to participate in, have now turned against the Jewish people. The Jewish people are alone in this. They are alone, okay? And they can't even rely upon the mainstreams of mainstream media to report accurately. So I agree with you. Here's a question from Steve in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. What non-Jewish groups are our best friends? Well, I would never give money to the Red Cross under any circumstances, especially since all Red Cross funds are fungible. No one works for the Red Cross in Gaza unless they're approved by Hamas. I would give money to Samaritan's Purse. I would give money to that. I'd give money to the Fox program, to the UJA, and I would give money not to Catholic Charities because I worked with them for a long time. I would give money to the federations. They are Jewish, but they also work with non-Jewish groups. So that's my answer. Samaritan Purse, go for it right away. They're wonderful people. Okay, question from, do you believe that Mike Johnson, GOP speaker, was appointed directly by God as he himself claims? Well, a lot of people say God willing, or thanks to God, and that God controls everything. And many people still know that God is sleeping or God is watching us. He's awake and watching us make our own decisions. I don't think that God has a direct access to Mike Johnson, and I don't think that Mike Johnson has a direct access to God. But all of us, big or small, Republican or Democrat, American or otherwise, have the same access to the same God in our own, each in our own way. And no one's got a monopoly and no one's got the market cornered. Rudy in Philadelphia, how do we fight the colleges? We fight the colleges by, first of all, recognizing that they are the cesspools of hate and bias and discrimination that we have always suspected that they were. Remember, it was the universities that created the eugenics genocide in the United States that afflicted so many people, that led to the genocide of so many millions, that led to the never-born, millions of never-born individuals, that kept the black man down, that succeeded in sterilizing 55,000 people, that introduced words like moron and imbecile and idiot into our scientific lexicon. Those were the universities. We're talking about Harvard. We're talking about Stanford. We're talking about Yale. We're talking about Princeton. And you have to remember that these institutions also worked closely with the Hitler regime. And now we're finally seeing in our modern day with instant communications, and thanks to the single most watched piece of congressional testimony in the history of our planet, Stefanik, as she's asking 3 of the archdeacons of academics of University of Pennsylvania, of Harvard, and MIT, if they could figure out if calling for genocide against an entire people was somehow a bad thing. So we have to start afresh. We have to find the universities and colleges that do not preach hate, that believe in free expression. And I have found many of them. Many of them are Christian colleges or colleges which are based on Christian beliefs, Jewish colleges. We have yeshiva colleges, a lot of academics at Jewish and other parochial colleges. We have to start fresh. Some people like Barry Weiss are starting their own universities. It is now very, very possible to accumulate a vast treasury of knowledge and wisdom without ever going to college or a dropout in college. I myself am starting to pull back. I used to say, well, I lectured at Harvard, and now people are not saying that. Harvard is a 17% drop in its early acceptance. In other words, people are applying to Harvard, and instead of jumping for joy when they get acceptance, 17% fewer of them are saying, I'm willing to go to Harvard. We have to rethink our colleges and universities, just the way we gave a new outlook to the colleges and universities in the Hitler regime, in the Soviet regime, and soon to be in the Arab regime. We've got to change this. We've got to change our thinking. If Harvard wants to be Harvard, let them be. But remember, we have a right to challenge their accreditation. We have a right to challenge their 501c3s, and we have a right to go elsewhere. That's what we have here. All right. Here's a note. Let's see what it says. Johnson has said God has called him to be the new Moses. Okay, so did Isaac Hayes. All right, and I loved Isaac Hayes. I don't really care what his conversation with God is. You know, everybody says, I spoke to God and God told me what to do. All of Islam is about a guy who spoke to God and he told me what to do. All of Judaism is about a guy who spoke to God and he told me what to do. A lot of people speak to God, and it's common in the Christian world to say, God has called me to do this. That's just, I don't care. I judge people by their deeds and by their actions. Now, here's the question I kept for the last. Marlene from Grand Rapids. She wants to know, what is it that I fear most? I fear that I will be right. That would be bad. Hope not, ladies and gentlemen. Hope not. So we're out of time. I want you to hold for my closing word of wisdom, just 1 minute away. But first, I thank my esteemed audience for all these wonderful questions. I also want to thank my talented international team, including Christine in Indiana, Holly in Socialist Nashville, Eve in Jersey, as well as Luke in Serbia for their outstanding works, as well as many others in numerous additional cities around the world. My team, each of them, is comprised of very dedicated people. I and we all owe them. I'll see everyone back here for the last show of the year, 3 p.m. in 2 Thursdays. You want to be a friend of the Edwin Black Show? Please go to the edwinblackshow.com/support. Do it now as soon as I hang up the show. Keep me independent. You want to hear me in person? Watch my website for events. I'm in Florida next month. Consult my events page at edwinblack.com. Until then, head over to any Barnes & Noble in the USA or any Amazon, Walmart, Apple, or Kobo platform in 190 countries across this roiling, toiling, boiling planet, where you can find any of my 200 book editions, such as IBM and the Holocaust, soon to be a major Hollywood blockbuster now that the actors and directors strike is over. And War Against the Weak is another one of my books, as well as The Far Hood. You want an autographed copy? Hit my personal, newly redesigned website. Wes did a fabulous job, edwinblack.com, and click books. Get access alerts to participate live in future shows at theedwinblackshow.com. You'll see a much enhanced and exquisitely produced version of this show and prior episodes by subscribing to our YouTube channel at The Edwin Black Show. Please click the notification button like tens of thousands of others have. You will love them. We put new ones up each week, produced by a bold international crew. Follow me at Edwin Black Book on that thing called X, as well as Facebook. And now for my closing word of wisdom. When history returns to rule the day, we must decide, do we repeat it or do we defeat it? Thank you. See you soon.